In today's video, we're going to be sketching freely and unlocking our artistic flow, all in just a few minutes. Look at this mad splash of colours, and from that mad splash of colours, we will sketch, and suddenly from our splash will emerge an amazing scene. I'm using just a couple of colours today, and all the colours, the tools, the materials, the brushes, the pens, everything I'm using, which is actually just a couple of things, will be listed in the description below so that you can join in and have a bit of fun unlocking your artistic freedom and your creative expression today. The start of this fun scene is a simple splash. So I've got a giant brush and I'm splashing on some chromium blue, that's cerulean chromium blue, along with a little bit of quinactone sienna. And all I've done is splash it totally randomly, I suppose, focused a little bit in the middle of the scene, but pretty much randomly splashed. I've now got some graphite grey on my brush, and you could use something like Payne's grey, indigo, or even just pretty much any random colour. And I'm joining up the splashes, and you can kind of see I'm starting to think, right, if this is going to be a city, then there's need to be some vertical lines. So I just dragged up some of these colours into vertical lines, but I don't want to blend everything together. So in fact, I thought I'd add a little bit more of that chromium blue, the cerulean chromium blue, in places, let that bleed out. The same with a few more touches of quinactone sienna. And now it's just time to let it dry. And when it's dry, you'll see how much calmer it is, but we have that lovely soft approach. And that is step one, really, of just unlocking your creative flow and really getting your freedom of expression down, just allowing yourselves to experiment with your colors and what they can do if you just have a play with them. And now we get to experiment with these shapes which have emerged. And all I'm doing is using a simple fine liner, starting off with a 0.5mm fine liner. You could use pretty much any size of fine liner, or you could use a fountain pen. I'm just playing with different things today to experiment and explore. And in processes like this, when we're trying to be free, experimenting, exploring, and using different things is, I think, a really great idea because it is the ultimate opportunity to do it. Moving from left to right across this scene, I'm just looking at what shapes there are and trying to outline those rather than overdo my creative muscles and create the scene too much from my own head. There's lots of shapes we can pick on. When we've got these shapes, we can start imagining windows, tiny details, but we don't need to flesh out every single building all at once. I thought, we'll do a few windows here, we'll do a little suggestion there of another window or two. In this white gap, we can imagine that there's like a hole going through these buildings. But I'm not spending a long time on any of the buildings. I'm just doing a touch here, a touch there, and moving on. And that's the key, because we don't want to get stuck when we're being free, when we are getting into our flow, when we are experimenting with new things. We don't want to get stuck not experimenting, instead of stressing out at one little corner of our page. So just try something and move on. And by doing that, we'll slowly, or actually in this case quite quickly, build up a really fun scene. Be prepared to make mistakes as well. Look, we are 3.5 minutes in and I spent 30 minutes of that doing the introduction. So if at this point I decided it had all gone to total rubbish and it was irredeemable, then I could just start again. I could just start again totally risk-free. And frankly, this is actually on the back of another painting. So we don't even have to waste materials. We can do processes like this on the back of other things so that we are literally experimenting in a totally risk-free way. I've moved on now and I'm using a 0.1mm marker. Part of my experimentation, I sort of realised that I wasn't able to do fine marks and little textures and hatching like I wanted to. That 0.5mm fine liner was just too sort of in your face with how bold the marks were. It just wasn't letting me be subtle. And I wanted to be a little more subtle. I know that doesn't sound like me, but today I thought I'm not being subtle enough. So I came in, I found a solution using a slightly thinner fine liner. And now I'm going back across my scene and I'm just adding a little bit more. I'm adding tiny touches here and there and just finding things which have worked before. And if they work before, I can add more of them. I can add more windows. If the hatching has worked, I can add a bit more of it. And then I noticed there's a little set of shapes I haven't found yet. They can become bushes. And then we can start adding fun things to flesh out our scene a little bit more. So Here's some wires, which could be telephone cables. I've added some street lights as well, of course. And on top of a couple of the buildings, we've got little suggestions of TV aerials or satellite dishes. What's missing from this, though, is it's all a little bit mid-tone, isn't it? We've got some lines, but we don't have very much depth or value. And so I thought, I'm done being subtle. Let's go and get out a Fude pen. So I've got a Fude pen now to be terribly unsubtle with. But this is great because I've been working for a few minutes on this piece now. I'm starting to understand the direction. Before I was feeling anxious because it hadn't really gone anywhere, and I was just worrying that I was rushing too much. And if I used a bold pen, it would just sort of I just make it too busy and messy and make mistakes which are too obvious. But now I feel happy. I'm understanding what this needs. It needs a clearer outline. It needs more contrast, which is what I was just mentioning about it all being a bit mid-tone. It needed something more punchy to really sell this as a real place, as a 3D place. And what better than that, or what is possibly better than that, I don't know, other than the Fude nib, a nice and bold nibbed pen. You could also use like a really bold fine liner, a medium nib fountain pen, or just press really hard with your fountain pen. Fountain pens tend to be a lot more flexible, so you can produce a really big range of marks. I'd also love to see, if you want to join in with this process, I'd love to see someone trying alcohol markers or pit pens or brush pens. I think they are really brilliant ways of experimenting with different quality of line, a bit like what I'm doing, but even braver, even more fun, and even more varied. Moving around with this, with these bolder marks, we're able to not just suggest contrast, not just suggest there's a little bit of blackness in some of the windows, and not just pull apart those sort of buildings, we're also able to suggest shadows through the simple application of a bold line. So by applying a bolder line to the left-hand side of most of these buildings, hopefully you're also, I'm starting to see that it's a bit more 3D. Hopefully you agree. You don't have to. These things are all subjective to some degree or other. But hopefully there, for example, that's a definite sudden 3D building just from one extra bold line. And all these little touches of contrast are, for me, bringing it more to life and making the scene just feel much more real, much more definite, much more there. These little trees, I keep leaving them till the end, but I do care about them. I just want to make sure they exist a little more. And again, that little bold line coming in. As part of the composition, it's all very linear if I don't have that road in the foreground. So just bringing in those leading lines, those lines sweeping across the scene is really important. And I'd done that with my fine liner, but those lines had got lost because of all the boldness and the lack of subtlety that I'm now introducing. Those lines had got lost. I'd had some of these little hatching lines. And now by introducing more bold hatching, the sort of hatching at the base of the buildings going vertically, and the hatching on the road or the pavement going horizontally, it just delineates the scene a bit more, again making it feel more 3D. What I'm starting to see now, and again I'd love to hear in the comments whether you agree or not, or what you feel at different points of this sketch. What I'm starting to see is buildings which kind of look 3D but transparent. So again, we're still missing something. We've got really light colours and we've got really dark colours. But in the middle of that, we need something, a middle value, which will let this scene just finish off, let this scene become a finished piece, which makes a whole load more sense. It's feeling vibrant, it's feeling interesting, it's definitely got character. But what can we do to explore and finish this off in a stress-free way? Well, of course, we can bring back a few more colours. And I'm going to use the same colours, but I'm just going to up the intensity of them. This blue, this chromium, cerulean chromium blue can be shadows initially. This quinacridone with a little bit of the blue in to slightly neutralise it can come round and be places where there's a bit more light in the scene, or just a different quality of shadow, different quality of tone compared to the blue. We've got cool and we've got warm. They have very different feels and very different effects, but they also pair really nicely together. They're opposite colours or complementary colours. And I should have said at the beginning, but the choice of those two colours wasn't an accident. The choice of those two colours was because they complement each other, they neutralise, and so they create something really dramatic. And like that, I don't want to overwork this, so I'm pretty much going to call this one done. Let me know in the comments if you've joined in or what you'd have done differently. What colours did you use if you did do this, and how did your scene evolve? If you're not subscribed, please do subscribe and hit the notification bell. It's really important for my channel, it means the world. And I'll see you in one of these videos next. So thank you everyone for watching my little sketching videos. If you enjoy my content, please do subscribe to my channel because it makes me really, really happy. Thanks again.